if we just work together, Roundnet could be so much better. Quick note, these views are my own. I'm speaking in my own personal capacity and not representing USA Roundnet. There are a lot of problems that need to be solved to make Roundnet the sport we dream of it becoming. But there's one specific problem we need to solve in the US and generally North America to have any chance of succeeding. In this video, I'll share my insights on what the problem is, how we got here, and how we can make it better. Or worse. When I first started playing Roundnet in 2015, the sport was relatively small. Heck, I played Tyler Chiswick in pool play at my first tournament. Do not ask me the score. There was a collective sense of growing Roundnet as something beyond just a single player, team, or friend group. But generally, the structure was reliant on a company, Spikeball, to do much of heavy lifting from an organizational, non-playing side of things. At the time, Spikeball was rapidly expanding and hiring new employees, some of whom were hired solely to focus on the sport of Roundnet and fostering future development. And so, Americans continued to play without dedicating much focus to the sport's development. As a newer player at the time, I was excited about contributing to the growth of the sport and thought my place in the community was just to grow a local club, run some tournaments, and just hope Spikeball would continue growing the sport. Now, Spikeball has done tons to advance the sport of Roundnet, there's no arguing that, but over time I realized that Spikeball was advancing and balancing two objectives, growing Roundnet and succeeding as a business. For me, just another Roundnet player, I had only one goal, grow Roundnet. Fast forward to 2020. The world shut down during a pandemic and Spikeball employees continued working on the development of Roundnet, advocating for company funds to support the creation of the International Roundnet Federation and USA Roundnet. Those employees recognized that for any sport to someday become an Olympic sport, it needed to follow the path that other Olympic sports follow, and proliferating more community and player-led national governing bodies around the world was a vital ingredient. As someone who had spent years working on advancing Roundnet, where Roundnet was the sole priority above any personal or Spikeball businesses, I was excited to join the founding board and contribute both my experience and skills as a young, at the time, professional. In my 4 years of volunteering for USA Roundnet, I've had the privilege of working alongside some awesome teammates, shout out to you all. And I've also been able to contribute to a ton of successes, some of which were more visible than others, but all of them incredibly important. And yet, I've always known one huge issue for USA Roundnet is that it can only go as far as the American community wants it to go. With the two big resources being time and money, USAR can only affect as much change as it has time volunteered or time paid for with, USA Roundnet membership funds. And so despite all this hard work by over 50 people in the past 4 years, not to mention a dozen of players who have represented us on the world stage and the thousands who have been connected to USAR in one way or another, I still see the same discord shared in one-on-one conversations that I have and in public forums. Some may say it has crescendoed in recent years, but it's the same sentiment I've been writing about and thinking about for over 7 years. Spikeball should not be in charge of Roundnet. And yet, I hardly ever see folks dig deep about how to finish that sentence. So here's what I'll say. We should be in charge of Roundnet. And as simple as it sounds, it's not so easy to do. It does become easier, of course, with more hands doing the work. Sometimes the work is really minimal and light and just requires consistency. It could be, running the local pickups or filing some paperwork to run a tournament. But sometimes it means, it's a bigger project, and where possible, those dedicated volunteers are really answering the call to do the work. And if the budget allows, of course, having those stipends for special projects and skill sets is incredible to unlock more progress for the sport. So what do we need to do in North America to push the sport forward? In North America? It sounds idealistic, but we need two things. Number one, collective buy-in. Right now, players, communities, creators, and so forth are running in a dozen different directions, and they're all genuinely claiming what they're doing will grow the sport. I know I believe them, but I also know that we'll move so much faster if we all run together in the same direction. Okay, but who decides what direction we move in as a sport and community? Again, we should. That's what national governing bodies exist to do. Set direction and steer and grow the sport and serve its members, you and me. So if we don't engage with them and we don't get involved with helping our NGBs function, it's going to be even harder for them to serve us and for them to grow this thing that we care about. So here's a simple question for you. Instead of saying, what can Roundnet do for me? Ask, what can I do for Roundnet? And in this context, what can I do for growing my national community or my local community, my NGB? I will bet you a ton of money from experience that the NGB, if you ask them, they'll empower you to do whatever you want to do, whether you're watching this in North America or anywhere in the world. So lean in and make it happen. The number two thing, and you're going to love this, is we need patience. Roundnet hasn't gotten where it is today overnight, and it won't get where we need it to be in a day. But if someone tells you otherwise, that we're gonna make this all thing happen magically, I promise you, they don't know what work has gone in to make the sport what it is today, and they don't know what it needs to get even further ahead. It just takes real work from real people. That's the only way this thing gets forward. So why should you listen to my take on any of this stuff? I mean, that's a fair question. I would say I've been volunteering on Roundnet longer than anyone in the world, and I would bet I've volunteered more hours than anyone in the world. I'd love to hear anyone's stories to counter it. And what do I get out of this? Growing the sport, getting us all on the same page and growing it together, and these NGBs, what's my angle on that if I volunteer for USA Roundnet? Just know, I'll say this for the millionth time, I don't make a dime volunteering for USA Roundnet. I would love to get paid to be working on this sport and growing it, but that's not where the highest impact can be had right now. Unfortunately, it's just a harsh reality. So I have the luxury of being able to volunteer, and I think everybody else, if they think hard about growing the sport and wanting it to be bigger, might be able to find an hour a month or an hour every other month to contribute to some sort of initiative. And while I know I can pour in lots of my own time and I can outwork any one person, I can't outwork everyone, and so more people being part of this movement, growing the sport and coming together to push us forward is going to get us a lot further, a lot faster. So you might be watching this video and thinking about USA Roundnet or some other national governing body and thinking, why doesn't my NGB do this or that other thing? Because if they don't do that, I don't care about them, and that's a fair feedback. I'll just say this: where your NGB has been, what it's been doing in the past or present right now, does not determine where it can go and what it can do. Honestly, the decision is up to you and me and anybody else that's part of that community to make it happen. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it was insightful. I know for me, I've been thinking about this topic and continue to think about it. I've been working on this video for multiple years, and I want to make sure I'm pushing the conversation out there for you all to start thinking about if you're not already, not just that the sport is a little bit disconnected, but how we actually can come together and grow it together. If I'm being honest, I've seen glimpses of their community wanting to take responsibility and ownership, but it's usually all talk and very little walk. And just with how small the sport is right now, there's a couple of ways we can go, but to me, it makes no sense to grow Roundnet for the benefit of a company. We as a community, that's players, coaches, observers, TDs, media personnel, and so on, that huge list of people that contribute to the sport, those should be the people who benefit from growing it, not a company. And so we need to build mutually beneficial partnerships with companies to grow the sport. That's obvious. However, if you need any proof of how the sport can be grown in a successful way, I'll cherry pick because we can all learn from best practices and say, you should learn about Roundnet Germany and how they were built. I'll link some notes below on how you can learn more about their history. But they've come together as a community and they've bought in saying they want to grow their sport together. And we're already seeing some benefits for their community and success from them. And it's still very early as a sport. We're still very young as a Roundnet community. So just wanted to push you in the right direction and get this conversation started. I can outwork every single person watching this video, but I can't outwork all of you guys, assuming there's more than one of you watching this. So help me or help your community or help your national governing body, wherever that is, grow the sport, because that's where we are as a sport right now, is we need to be growing the sport for ourselves. I think the sport should belong to us and we should be benefiting from that as a community. Very simple stuff, I think, but not necessarily the easiest to do just because it's a simple concept. So it's going to take some work. Let's do it. Let's get it done.